Why you do this? Understand yourself. You already know it's over. That's why you feel so tired. Because pretending not to know is exhausting. This is not just about a person. It can be a job, a version of you, a dream you inherited but never truly wanted, a habit that once protected you, a city, a friendship, a role, a way of thinking that doesn't fit your soul anymore. Something in your life stopped resonating a while ago. And you felt it, immediately, quietly, deeply, but instead of leaving, you started negotiating with yourself. Maybe I'm just restless, maybe I'm ungrateful, maybe I need to try harder, maybe this is just what adulthood feels like. But here's the truth that keeps following you. When something is no longer aligned, your body knows before your mind admits it. And by the end of this, you're going to understand why you keep staying in things you've already outgrown, and what finally makes a person leave for real. You know this feeling. It's subtle at first, nothing dramatic, just a quiet disconnect. You're still showing up, still doing the thing, still answering the calls, still going through the motions. But something inside you is no longer there. The energy change, the meaning change, the intimacy change, the spark turned into maintenance, the curiosity turned into obligation. And you keep noticing it in strange moments. When you wake up, when you get home, when you imagine your future and feel heavy instead of alive. You're not completely miserable, and that's what makes it harder. Because it's easier to leave something obviously terrible. It's harder to leave something that is just quietly dead. Something functional, something familiar, something that still makes sense on paper but no longer makes sense in your chest. What keeps you there is rarely confusion. It's attachment to what the thing used to mean. You're not always holding on to the reality. You're holding on to the memory, to the identity attached to it, to the story you built around it, to the version of you that once needed it. And this is where people get trapped. They think they're deciding about the present. But they're not. They're arguing with the past. They're loyal to a chapter that already ended. They're trying to revive something that was only true for an earlier self. And because that earlier self was real, the attachment feels real too. You tell yourself this matters because it mattered before. You tell yourself you should stay because you once prayed for this. You tell yourself walking away would disrespect the effort, the history, the sacrifice. But history is not the same thing as alignment. Time invested is not the same thing as truth. And just because something was right for you once does not mean it is right for you now. The hardest part is not realizing something is over. The hardest part is what that realization threatens. Because once you admit this no longer fits, something else gets exposed. How long you've been pretending. How much of yourself you abandoned to keep it alive. How afraid you were to disappoint people. How much energy you spent performing commitment after your heart had already left. And that hurts. It hurts to realize your intuition was right months ago. It hurts to realize you stayed out of guilt, fear, image, or habit. It hurts to admit that your loyalty turned into self-betrayal. And this is why people delay. Not because they don't know, but because knowing creates a reckoning. A reckoning with time, a reckoning with truth, a reckoning with the life they built around something that no longer feels alive. Leaving is never just leaving. It is also grieving the illusion that this could still become what you wanted it to be. Your nervous system does not automatically choose what is right. It chooses what is familiar. And that difference changes everything. Because you can be deeply unhappy in something and still feel terrified to leave it. Not because it is good for you, but because your body knows how to survive it. It knows the rules. It knows the rhythm. It knows what version of you to become in that environment. The known pain feels manageable. The unknown possibility feels dangerous. So the body interprets change as threat. Even sacred change, even necessary change, even the kind that would set you free. That's why your chest tightens when you imagine leaving. That's why your mind suddenly becomes full of reasons to wait. That's why your entire system starts bargaining the moment truth gets close. Your body is not asking, is this aligned? It is asking, will I survive what comes after? And that question keeps more people trapped than lack of clarity ever does. So then the mind takes over. And it starts doing what the mind does best. It makes the exit look complicated. It multiplies the consequences. It creates 1,000 angles. It confuses discomfort with danger. It tells you to give it more time, to wait for a better moment, to gather more proof, to be mature, to be rational, to not be impulsive. But here's what most people miss. Overthinking is often just emotional procrastination in a smarter outfit. You're not solving the problem. You're stretching the distance between knowing and doing. You're trying to think your way out of a truth you can already feel. And that is why logic becomes a trap. Because the longer you explain your misalignment, the easier it is to live beside it. You start normalizing your own disconnection. You start calling your numbness stability. You start calling your hesitation being wise. And all the while, your spirit is getting quieter. The pattern is always strangely similar. You feel the disconnect, you brush it off, you stay busy, you try harder, you become more understanding, more patient, more forgiving, more reasonable, you lower your standards without admitting it. You silence your irritation, you explain away your emptiness. You tell yourself every path has dull seasons. You tell yourself maybe the problem is you. So you self-correct instead of self-honor. You adjust instead of leave. You perform gratitude while privately feeling drained. Then something in you speaks up again. Maybe through boredom, maybe through resentment, maybe through fatigue, maybe through fantasizing about another life. And for one clear second, you know. Then the pattern resets, and you go back in. There are two selves fighting inside you. One is the self that can feel the truth, the self that notices energy, the self that knows when something has expired, the self that does not need a spreadsheet to recognize misalignment. Then there is the self that is terrified of what truth will cost. The self that thinks leaving means failing, the self that fears regret, the self that wants certainty before courage, the self that confuses endurance with virtue. And these two selves do not want the same thing. One wants aliveness, the other wants protection. One wants honesty, the other wants continuity. One says, this no longer fits. The other says, but look how much we built around it. One says, we're shrinking. The other says, at least we know this pain. And this is the torture of it. You know, and you still stay, not because you're weak, but because different parts of you are loyal to different survival strategies. Here's how the loop works. You feel the misalignment, you get uncomfortable, you imagine leaving, your body panics, your mind starts negotiating, you delay the decision, you numb the signal, you go back to routine. Then the disconnect grows, so your resentment grows, your fatigue grows, your self-doubt grows, you start feeling guilty for not being fully present. So now you work even harder to make it work. That effort temporarily distracts you. Then the truth returns, usually louder, usually sharper, usually at 2 a.m., usually when you finally get still. And then the whole cycle repeats. Trigger, tension, delay, self-betrayal, repeat. This pattern usually started long before the current situation. At some point, leaving became associated with pain. Maybe leaving meant disappointing people. Maybe it meant becoming the villain in someone else's story. Maybe it meant instability. Maybe it meant guilt. Maybe you learned that endurance gets praised more than honesty. Maybe you were loved for being easy, loyal, adaptable, low maintenance. So you became skilled at staying, skilled at understanding, skilled at carrying more than your share, skilled at making difficult situations feel normal, skilled at surviving what should have been left. And those skills probably made you impressive, dependable, strong, mature, but they also made you dangerous to yourself. Because now you can tolerate too much. You can remain in places that no longer deserve your life force, simply because you've become very good at enduring misalignment. And then it becomes identity. You become the person who doesn't quit, the person who sees things through, the loyal one, the resilient one, the deep one, the one who can handle complexity, the one who does not run when things get hard. And those qualities are beautiful, but they become a prison when you use them against yourself. Because now leaving feels like betrayal of who you think you are. You don't just fear the loss of the thing, you fear the loss of your self-image. If I leave, was I naive? If I leave, did I waste years? If I leave, am I selfish? If I leave, who am I without this role, this dream, this label, this structure? That's why people stay in old identities long after they stop being true. Because an ending is not just external, it is also an ego death. And ego deaths feel violent, even when they are holy. Now here is the relief. Outgrowing something does not make you inconsistent. It makes you alive. It means you are still in conversation with your own soul. It means you can still feel when something becomes too small, too false, too forced. It means your inner world has not gone numb. And that is not a flaw. That is intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, psychological intelligence. Because dead things do not disturb you unless some part of you is still awake enough to notice. The discomfort you feel is not proof you are unstable. It is proof you are no longer willing to lie to yourself as easily. And this is where something shifts. You stop asking, why can't I be satisfied? And you start asking, why am I trying so hard to stay loyal to what I've already outgrown? That question is more honest. That question has heat in it. That question leads somewhere real. Because now the discomfort is no longer the enemy. It is the message. The first shift is not to leave immediately. The first shift is to stop gaslighting yourself. Stop treating your intuition like an inconvenience. Stop demanding courtroom-level evidence for what your body has been whispering for months. Start naming the truth in simple language. This does not feel right anymore. This is draining me. I am staying mostly because I am afraid. I keep hoping for a return that is not coming. I have changed. This has not. That is enough to notice. That is enough to honor. And this is the part that changes everything. Once you tell the truth without decorating it, you interrupt the spell. You stop feeding confusion. You stop romanticizing delay. You stop calling the cage complexity. Honest naming is not a small thing. It is the beginning of self-respect. The next shift is even more powerful. Stop asking whether leaving is uncomfortable. Of course it is. Ask a more intelligent question. Which discomfort leads me back to myself? The discomfort of leaving, or the discomfort of staying disconnected from my own truth? Because both hurt. One hurts clean, the other hurts slowly. One is grief, the other is erosion. One is a sharp ending, the other is a daily leaking of life force. This is why so many people remain stuck. They are choosing the pain that is more familiar, not the pain that is more honest. But once you see that both paths cost you something, your decision gets clearer. Now it is no longer comfort versus discomfort. Now it is aligned pain versus misaligned pain. And that distinction matters. Here is the real solution. Do not wait until you feel no fear. Wait until you can no longer ignore the cost of staying. Then make the decision from clarity, not collapse. Use this filter. Ask yourself 3 questions. What am I pretending not to know? What am I preserving by staying? And what part of me is dying here? That last question is the one most people avoid. Because it gets brutally real. If the answer is my joy, my curiosity, my standards, my peace, my self-respect, my voice, then you already have your truth. Next, separate grief from misalignment. You are allowed to grieve something and still leave it. Missing it does not mean it is right. Loving what it was does not mean you should stay for what it is. Then do one practical thing. Create a clean exit sentence before your fear gets loud again. Something simple, something spoken, something real. This no longer aligns with who I am becoming. I appreciate what this was, but I cannot keep betraying myself to maintain it. That is not drama. That is adulthood with a spine. You were never weak for struggling to leave. You were attached. You were loyal. You were scared. You were human. And maybe you were also more awake than the people around you. Because not everyone notices when something stops resonating. Not everyone can feel the moment a chapter becomes too small for their becoming. But you can. That is why this hurts. That is why this follows you. That is why the quiet feels loud lately. Some part of you is done pretending. Some part of you is done negotiating with what no longer nourishes you. Some part of you is ready to stop confusing familiarity with destiny. And that part of you is not reckless. It is ready. So maybe the real question is not why you are still here. Maybe the real question is this. How much longer are you willing to trade your aliveness for the comfort of what you've already outgrown?